Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Joe Morrison with the 49th State Angel Funds podcast, the 49SAF pod. Wrapping up Alaska Startup Week, the week of global entrepreneurship, a week worldwide where communities everywhere celebrate entrepreneurship. You know, I've been at this a while, and I just have to say, I think that was the best Alaska Startup Week I've ever seen. I don't know what it was like in communities outside of Anchorage, but I just was so impressed with everything from the kickoff and the great startup weekend that was put together by hardworking volunteers, too many of which are to name, to the end of the week, or what ended the week with me, which was a discussion on diversity and inclusion and how it relates to entrepreneurship and the creation of new businesses in Alaska. Lots of highlights during the week. Great week, no complaints, and I'm wondering if maybe we'll get a chance to sort of wrap up with some thoughts, even on a blog or a Medium post. There was a lot to the week, and I think there was a lot of density. And I just want to say thanks to the community so much. Thanks to all the people who were involved, from the entrepreneurs who took time out from building their companies to get involved in leading a lot of the week, to the entrepreneurial ecosystem builders who also did a lot of building and leading. Just a lot of gratitude. And similarly, gratitude's covered in this interview with Andy Rogers of Alaska Business Week. I've known Andy for a very long time. The first time I met Andy was in the offices of my boss at Credit Union One. So this is going back to like mid 2000s, 04, 03, probably. I guess that's the early 2000s. And Andy was looking for a business loan for his company, which I can't believe was called Alaska Web Art at the time, but maybe it was. I don't know. It is the company today, and he's been out of it for a long time, called Pango Media. Anyway, this is Andy's story a little bit. It's the story of somebody who ended up building a company as he was trying to figure out his life trajectory. More than that, though, it's a little bit of the story of just an Alaskan and where he ended up and why he works in entrepreneurial capacity building now. Andy is relentless about his work. He does one thing, he does it well, he does it better than anybody else, and that is run week-long business camps for students to show them that entrepreneurship is a viable career path. And I think that a lot of the conversations we're having about inclusion and a lot of the conversations we're having about making sure that people get access to the same resources, well, the earlier we work in the education life cycle, the better off maybe people could be downstream. So he's trying to do that work, and he's doing a really great job with it. He goes off the road system, he's in the road system, and he is relentlessly and single-mindedly focused on putting on a great camp for kids and teaching them about entrepreneurship with local business mentors. Super, super cool. We cover a lot of things, and it's a really fun conversation, and this is one of the most lightly edited conversations I've ever had. So let's have some fun. Let's listen to Andy Rogers. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Thanks again for an amazing Alaska Startup Week, everybody who was involved. You have so much to be proud of with how this conversation has grown over the years. All right, let's listen to Andy Rogers. Look, man, all we have to do is talk.
Well, we're going to talk about topical stuff, right?
Sure. So, I mean, what's your take on the recent run in the bull market and how long it's going to last?
I don't follow the market.
You don't?
Nope. I pay somebody to do that for me, and I give them money on a regular recurring basis so it grows, and I don't mess with it. And I check those accounts once, maybe twice a year.
And you're relatively happy
with the investments and stuff?
Yeah. I mean, actually, tell me if you're not happy so your financial advisor can find out this way.
I'm happy with the performance of my financial advisor, and it wasn't kidding. I don't check those accounts very often. I think people who check their accounts all the time tend to make poor decisions because they react to things that are going on instead of just investing slowly over time. So I don't know. I sure hope things are going well, but I'm happy with the performance of my manager historically. So yeah, we'll see. But I don't follow markets at all.
All right, good.
I bump into it, but I don't follow it at all.
Yeah, I think it's technical enough that most of us should realize that we're best served by working with professionals in the space.
Yeah, I think like most people my age or our age, I flirted
59 and a half.
You aged me. Closing in on 50. Most people my age, I flirted when I was younger with the idea of being a day trader. But
remember that thing?
Yeah.
Remember that was a real thing?
I remember people who quit their jobs to do that as a thing.
Yeah.
And when the market was on a steady, 12, 13% increase a year, it made a lot of people look really good at that.
Which is, I think, what it's been doing for the last few years.
Yeah, maybe you could do it again, but I don't have the information necessary. I don't have the tools to react quickly enough to do that. So no, I invest in a very, very pedestrian way. I give my money to somebody who does it for a living.
Do you do anything privately? I mean, you're associated with small business. You have a small business.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to talk about this if you don't want to. Feel free. In fact, if you don't want to talk about anything, just say, Joe, I don't want to talk about it. But
fair enough.
I think the question that I've got for you is, so you do invest in the market. You are an esteemed member of Generation X. We're not going to get into memes and different generational tendencies, but you're a successful guy and you have capital. You've deployed capital. So how do you do it privately? How do you do it outside of the market?
Fair question. Not one I was anticipating, but I'm happy to talk about that. So yeah, I think like most working people, I have traditional vehicles, personal IRAs, work associated 401ks for both my wife and myself. We have personal savings that, like we were talking about, I give to a money manager. I own real estate.
Okay.
It's all in Anchorage. So it's, this won't come across on the podcast, but Eric Woods here, diversified. It's in, real estate in the same market essentially as my residence. So I don't know if you're really going to invest in real estate. I don't know if that's the smartest way to do it, but I actively manage, our rental properties. So it's convenient. It's close. We do have money in businesses. It's not at all liquid because it's tied up in very long-term investments for companies that, provide livelihoods rather than, any kind of traditional stock market like return. And then, and then just personally, we try to be wise about we're not real stuff driven people. We're more kind of an experience driven family. So if we're investing in, I say investing, if we're spending money on, something that isn't, needs, it's for a trip or, some kind of experience with the kids, not necessarily things.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we manage and spend our money.
So
I have a lot of thoughts on that though.
We'll keep going.
Well, I think a lot of people view money as something they want to get. And I think there's been times in my life where I viewed it that way too. And I think money is just one form of a means to an end. Like there's different currencies you can spend. There's, time, there's money, there's relationship capital. But for me, it's mostly, my wife and I routinely go back to what do we want out of life? What are the things we want to accomplish? What are the places we want to go to, the things we want to do, the opportunities we want to provide for the kids, and then figure out how much that's going to cost in any one of those capitals. And then, my days of chasing big salaries or big paydays are long over. There's way more important metrics for me than dollars. I do think it's an important metric. It's just not the biggest one for me anymore.
So what's the biggest metric for you now?
It's got to be experiences. I'm not that old. I'm closing in on 50, but we only get one go at this. And when when I look back at my 30s, and mostly without regrets, but there are certainly things I could have done differently to either been in a different place now or capitalized more on that time there. I'm in my 40s and, trying to make the most of that time. And when I'm looking at my 50s and 60s and God willing, 70s and 80s, who do I want that person to be and what do I want to do? Those are the things I'm planning for, not like how much money I can make right now or, what kind of things I can get. There's stuff I want to do.
Okay. So continuing down that path, who's that person?
Who is that future person?
Yeah.
I don't know if this is naive or if I'm fortunate, but it looks very similar to the person I am now. Obviously, the kids will be at a different point in their own lives. So, in some ways, I'm going to get a lot of time to myself that I don't have now that's dedicated to them and their schedules. But this may change over time. My personal plan for myself certainly has evolved over the years, but I've worked really hard at it, and I've kind of got myself to the point where I'm really content. I have business interests that are successful. I have my personal crusades and aspirations, things like Alaska Business Week that are doing really, really well. The family's good. My wife's in a great place with her career. It still gets to do all the travel and stuff that she does. We can afford both the opportunity cost of her doing that and, the time away that she has from the house and the family to do that. So it looks very, very similar. I think like all people, maybe I'm envisioning it going a little slower, a few less irons in the fire, but not many different irons in the fire, if that makes sense.
So I think before we talk about your bio, we should briefly, if you're comfortable with it, talk about your spectacular spouse. Because you are married to a spectacular spouse.
Yeah. She's way more interesting to talk about.
She's super interesting. So talk briefly, just that story, a little bit of not only how you guys got together, which was a minute ago.
It's been a little while, yeah.
So talk a little bit about that, but talk about her diverse portfolio in life.
Yeah, she's an interesting case because, especially if we're talking about anything business or economic related, she grew up in, communist occupied country. She's Slovak. Most Americans would know it as, at least of my generation, would know it as Czechoslovakia, but it was a country split up, again in the 90s. So she's from the Slovak side of Czechoslovakia, and she came over here by way of athletics. Although she's academically incredibly gifted too. She was the Slovak and Czechoslovak national alpine champion, and then came over here to ski NCAA. And so her and I met when we were both pre-med. This is me going back to the university after a couple breaks, and she has gone on to a fantastic career in physical therapy. She's a doctor of physical therapy, one of very few, but I think also the first Olympic Committee certified medical providers, certainly physical therapists on that list. And travels with the USD team. She goes to the Olympics, takes care of that crew. She, up until very, very recently, we owned physical therapy clinics around the state. Earlier this year, we sold out of those clinics, and she just recently took another position at a more sports-specific clinic here in town, and we'll still travel with the team. So yeah, she's incredible.
Yeah. So you guys met your second time attending university.
Yeah, second or third, depending on how you look at it.
Let's go through 1, 2, and 3.
College is a tricky topic these days, and I work with a lot of high school students. So I'm often reluctant to share. I'll share information, but I won't share too much of my personal opinion because it may differ from each individual kid or their relationship with their own families. So, but I have really strong opinions about secondary education, college, whatever. And I think in some ways I dodged a bullet. I got recruited hard out of high school. I didn't have any real interest in going to college, but I got recruited hard, and they wanted me to take out a lot of loans and do these things, and I probably wouldn't have gone at all except for I got scholarship. I got a full ride scholarship to go to university here in Alaska, and for me, I either wanted to go to art school, I was looking at Seattle Art Institute, or stay out in the valley, out in Palmer, and work on the farm. And my choice was to stay and work on the Vanderweel farm because I think it was easier. It was known. It was, there was nothing I was risking there. I could be complacent and do that. But I got recruited hard, so I went to UA, and I went for a year, and then, like I said, full ride scholarship, and then I dropped. It wasn't the right place for me. I was 17 when I finished high school. I was on the young side of going to college. So I dropped out, and I'm really glad I did. I think maybe for some people, a 4-year degree and going straight through is fine, but I am so glad I didn't, because it gave me an opportunity, I think, really to get ahead of a lot of my counterparts in life, in business, in building equity. Given the choice between a $40,000 education and 20 to 40% down on a home, people's mileage may vary, but I like having that asset. So I had a kind of non-traditional path through university. I like I said, I dropped out. I did go to music school in my kind of university break. Got a performance degree in music, but when I went back, I had a 14-year path through college. Honestly, my wife's probably the only reason I really finished. Business was successful. Had a lot of good things going that was taking up my time, and but she pressured me to keep going. So class here, class there. I didn't take many breaks, like full semesters off. I'd always have 1 or 2 classes. But 14 years, I finally finished that biochem degree.
So talk about leaving Alaska in that period, coming back to Alaska, and then starting whatever you started.
Well, there's a pretty big gap in that. So I left Alaska in the early 90s. I went down to the music school I went to was in Hollywood, California, like right in Hollywood, between
named
Musicians Institute. It was on McCadden, right between Hollywood and Sunset, right, half a block from Mann's Chinese Theater. So that was a boy from Palmer, carrying everything he owned, wearing a sweater his mom knit for him, caribou antlers my dad had bored out.
And the world was a lot bigger back then, right? Things weren't as, the internet didn't make the world smaller. We didn't know as much about the lower 48.
Nobody had internet stuff.
Yeah.
This was all pre-cell phone. That's when I left Alaska. And it was a good experience for me. Obviously, I learned a lot musically and met a lot of people and did a lot of formative relationship building with people I still stay in touch with to this day around the world. But one person came back. So I was down there for 2 years to get that music degree. During a break, a buddy, a guy from Sweden, wanted to see Alaska. So I came home and spent a couple weeks with my parents, and then he flew up. And we got in my car and we drove down through Canada, and that was a harrowing experience. The road wasn't what it is today. We lost the gas tank in northern BC, and it was quite an adventure on its own. But he didn't tell me this until later, and I almost wish people would have mentioned something sooner. But he said something after I'd finished music school and moved home that I didn't realize is everyone knew I wasn't going to stay. Like, we had lots of opportunities. I was playing with some really successful bands and very well financed bands, and had opportunities to go overseas or play on cruise ships. Like, there's a lot of opportunity for good players and educated players, hard workers. And so I could have stayed, but I went home and everyone was like, "Oh yeah, we totally knew you were going to go." And so I asked my buddy Johan, he's like, why is everyone saying that? He's like, you are such a happier person in Alaska. But nobody else got to see it, but that week I was home with you, with you in Alaska before we drove back down to LA. It's like you were just a happier person. And I didn't realize that. Somebody should have told me. Would have been good for me to know. So I always come back. I've left a few times. But in that 2-year stint in LA was definitely the longest. But I always come home.
So at some point, you're probably, I don't remember if you were in school or not. I didn't know you back then.
Yeah.
At some point, you're like building stuff. You're a geek and you're building stuff in your apartment, house, whatever, racks, technology stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. I was always more of a software guy than a hardware guy.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, how did all that start?
I think as with a lot of entrepreneurial efforts, it started with an accident. Figuratively and literally in this case, I was working construction and in the evenings and going to school during the day. That's when I had met and was dating Susanna. And I got hurt.
That, for the record, that is your wife.
Oh yeah, Susanna, my wife. So I was out mountain biking in Kincaid and went over the handlebars and broke my shoulder. So I couldn't do construction work. It was during the summer, so I wasn't actively in school at the time. And so rather than mope around the house or whatever, I picked up this newfangled thing called Photoshop.
And you were aged?
I don't know, early 20s, 24, 25.
Okay.
Mid-20s.
Photoshop at 25, keep going.
And started futzing around with that and 3D programs, stuff that took like 2 hours to render. The software was not what it is today. So I started futzing around with that and started taking jobs on the side, making websites. Never did really go back to construction because I started to get busier and busier with that. And then myself and a partner, or a buddy rather, we're both doing the same thing, kind of just freelance web design stuff on the side. And some other friends of ours were starting a networking company, and they were like, hey, we need a website. And we're like, oh, yeah, we can make you a website. They were like, you know what, this is cool. Kind of goes along with what we're doing. Maybe you could just make websites for the networking clients we're going to get. So it was this big thing, like 6 different people involved. It was going to be this enormous company. And then, so we were like, sure, we can try this. And when the dust settled, it came time for everyone to like pony up, quit their day job, pick your analogy. We looked around and it was just me and Tony Wright. He was the other web designer. It was just the 2 of us. So we're like, I guess we have a networking company that only does web work. So we started making websites, and as that industry grew up and people started to expect more out of their websites and their online presences, we kind of had to learn how to program and learn how to tie into other data systems, and we just kind of grew up with the industry. And
so tell me about the name of that company.
Well, when we started, we were Alaska Net Technologies, again, because it was intended originally to be a networking company. We bought our first competitor, or we bought one of our competitors. It was the first company we bought. I don't know, it was 2 or 3 years after we had started, and that company was Alaska Web Art. We took their name because we had like, I don't know, a dozen kind of large clients, and they had like 600 small ones. So it's just easier to tell our dozen that, we purchased another company and changed our name. And we bought a hosting company, a local hosting company, which we later sold to GCI. Hosting kind of became more of like a utility and less like a boutique kind of unique thing. So we sold that. And that company's still going today. I've been out for over a decade now, but they're called Pango Technology and owned by 2 great guys. And yeah, they're going strong today. Probably bigger and better than wherever I am. I don't know about bigger. I don't know what size they are now.
Yeah, and I think we'll try in the future at some point to get Craig and Jeff at Pango to talk because there's different routes to entrepreneurship.
Oh yeah.
Entrepreneurship through acquisition is a thing, or handing off stuff.
Yeah, Tony and I started that company on a spare computer in my desk was literally in the closet because his desk was above where the bed used to be in this little bedroom in the house we shared. And that's a fine way to start a company. It's kind of like the normal, GCI was started out of the back of a van kind of story. But I think a lot of opportunities for people are entrepreneurial opportunities for people are to buy into existing ventures or to fund somebody who can do something you can't or do something you really like, but they do it better. Right. And I think that's a fine route to entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I think that
the birthing something from nothing isn't really for everyone. And it's really risky, right? Most of those fail.
No disagreement from me. I think that there is some narrow view of entrepreneurship that is both has happened recently and kind of is continuing. And
which one?
Well, the whole like high growth startup thing, everything has to be external capital, which is funny because it's sort of what I do.
Yeah.
But, what's interesting is that when I went to school, and I went to school for this stuff out of the country, you kind of see a suite of this. You see family businesses and generations taking over previous generations of business and how those companies evolve over time. That's pretty popular worldwide. It's probably even popular in America. You learn about franchising, and franchising is great because franchising decreases a lot of the risks.
Oh,
right.
My next business would be a Jamba Juice if they would let us have one this far north.
I feel like
I think franchises are fantastic.
You would do well with Jamba Juice. Yeah,
we would kill it up here.
Franchises do not do badly in Alaska.
Yeah.
Like they generally are at the top of the curve in their national spend.
Yeah, I think it surprises people how competitive it is to actually earn one of those franchise spots. It can be difficult to win them over, to trust in you to open their brand.
Right. So family business, franchising, bootstrapping, which is what you did.
Yeah.
Yes, the whole startups, let's raise external capital, whether from angels or from VCs. And
I think the investment world is kind of, I don't know if they've co-opted it, but they've definitely got the highest profile version, I guess, of entrepreneurship, because it's this whole we will take your money, or we'll take, this rich person's money or this group of people's money. We'll throw it at a really cool idea, something new and revolutionary, something super disruptive, and we'll, double your money or 10x your money or 50x your money, or there'll be this crazy IPO or something. And those happen. Those are cool. But in my experience, the most meaningful entrepreneurship on a personal level, on a community level, it's like they're not new ideas. There's somebody who's really passionate about a hairdresser opening, hanging out a shingle and opening their own place, right? That's a lot of new businesses and a lot of really successful businesses that generate livelihoods for individuals, for communities, for lifetimes, really.
Yeah, and I think the general point is
it's not as sexy as like the next .com startup or whatever, but it's jobs for people.
Yeah, I
enabling the lives they want to live and careers they want to have. That's the stuff I like.
What we're after is a portfolio view, right? And so, one, there's believe it or not, there's a decline in American entrepreneurship, period.
There is.
Yeah, the data from the Kauffman Foundation shows a remarkable decline for several decades in the number of Americans that start new businesses.
Yeah, and I don't know, the last stats I saw were from like 2016, and as with all stats, you take them with a grain of salt, but they weren't Kauffman, but same trend, like a decades-long decrease in the start of new businesses. Although an interesting corollary there is it looks like the success rate of new startups is slowly increasing over that same amount of time. So it's an interesting question. If fewer businesses are being started, but the ones that are starting are seeing a higher likelihood of continuing, at least past their first year of existence, why aren't we seeing more starts? I have an opinion on that, and I think that's just because we're not equipping people. That's a cop out. We're not teaching people that that's a viable pathway. I think we're really pushing hard to show people through this real traditional education pathway. And if you have people who are kind of entrepreneurial by inclination, we're not really teaching them. We're not giving them the tools that they need to capitalize on those impulses, or in some cases, and I think the worst case scenario, my opinion, is they go through their early life until they have too many commitments to try, not even knowing that starting their own thing is an option. So part of the reason why I spend my days doing what I do.
Yeah, I mean, you've given us the segue. So
yeah, tee that up nice.
Yeah, nice work. Talk about what you do. Tell us what you do, man.
I do a lot of things, but one of the things I do, and I guess the hat I'm mostly wearing today, is Alaska Business Week. And most people think that's a business publication. Maybe poor naming choice on our part, but Alaska Business Week, we teach high school students how to run companies successfully and profitably and ethically. And we're a one-trick pony. That is the one trick we have. We run a summer camp, various places around the state, teaching students how to run a company.
And why do it? Why did you started this job when? Why did you
I've been
take the job?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the little bit of the backstory on the camp itself, it was originally a handful of board members from the State Chamber of Commerce. It was myself, Kip Knudsen, who was with Tesoro at the time. Tesoro is the original and to date largest funder. Well, it's Marathon now, but it was Tesoro at the time, funder of our program. So Kip Knudsen, predominantly Ann Ringstad. She was a woman based out of Fairbanks. She worked with UAF, and it was really Ann's baby. She drove everything, and was the real first champion for the program. And then myself and a couple others, and we saw a lack of effort from the business community in kind of grassroots growing our own, right?
So this was like 2009?
Yeah, the whole thing kicked off in 2009. Like, I think Tesoro's original gift was in 2009. The first camp was in 2010. So we've been doing this for about a decade. That first program, we talked to, and this is why we're named what we're named, we talked to an organization called Washington Business Week that Ann had got wind of, and she went down and saw one of their camps. It was like, yeah, this is exactly what we've been talking about. This is what we need in Alaska. So we hired Washington Business Week to come up and show us how they did their thing. So they had this week-long program where brought students into a university campus and in a very intensive style ran them through. It's really like a grad level business simulation, and the students make marketing decisions, they make production decisions, they make ethical decisions, they make executive decisions on how their company is going to run, and it's competitive. There's winners and losers. They're competing. They're organized into air quotes here again, companies competing against each other, and it gives us a lot of opportunities to teach them life lessons too. But the ultimate goal is they learn the underlying business principles on how to run a company. So we did that as a kind of on a volunteer effort for a lot of years, and then until the program had a little bit of its own gravity. Like, this is important. It's going really well. We shouldn't rely on the good graces and the fortuitous availability of volunteers to make this a thing. We need to make it its own organization, put a person directly responsible for it in place. So formed a 501c3, hired an executive director. I was on the board at the time. I've since stepped down from the board to more actively manage and grow the program. But that's kind of how we came to be. And we're still a one-trick pony. I get a lot of requests to do other things or to try other formats, but we've got a really good thing going with our 1 week summer camp style programs, and that's what we focus on.
Talk about where you held camps in 19.
In 19?
Yeah.
Oh, 2019? Yeah. So, good year for camps. In fact, a great year. For the first time ever, we did a completely off the road system camp. Our first camp of 19 was Kotzebue, and we'll be going back there in 2020. We've had students from that area before. We've had students from almost certainly every region of the state, most of the communities, in fact, over the years. But we always brought them to either Fairbanks or to Anchorage, where we can, house students in a dorm, where we have facilities, right? This is our first time taking the show on the road to an off the road system community, and it went great. We're going to do more of that. In fact, I'll finish 2019, but a little preview for 2020. We're going to Naknek for the first time. There's 4 school districts in the Bristol Bay region. They're bringing students together and centralizing them in Naknek, and we'll do a camp there. And then also our first time in the Arctic Slope Borough. We'll be going up there in June. So that's 2020. But so 2019 was great. We did Kotzebue for the first time, and then we did Anchorage program, and we did another program in the Mat-Su. This year, the Mat-Su program was in Colony, but kind of bounces around out there. And then we have one more coming up in December, another Anchorage-based program.
And one staff person, you.
Yeah, I've got good help. Like we have it's still volunteer-driven program. We use mentors from the business community, and they do a lot of I teach them, they teach the kids. But yeah, we're lean and mean. Kind of like what ANSEP is to science and engineering, we are to business, but without the fancy buildings.
Yeah, well, it'd be nice if we could all have a beautiful building.
I don't want it. I keep overhead low.
Yeah, well, hey, this is a nice office. So, there's that.
Mm-hmm.
There's woods and it's pretty and you can see things and that's nice.
Yeah.
So I think the question that I've got for you now is what was kind of like your big takeaway from 2019 of operating this year? Was it different from other years in any way besides your expansion? Doing more stuff?
They're all different. The overall challenge, I think, will never change. At least I can't envision a scenario where we look the same and this changes. And that's getting students, right? This is business people teaching business. We're outside the traditional education pathways. We try to partner as much as we can with school districts and career and technical advisors, but student recruitment is tough because, a lot of our school districts and teachers, they're set up to protect those students from a lot of outside influences. And I think that's good because, like I mentioned with myself, I had recruiters, everything from college to military to trade unions. Everyone's trying to get people, credit card companies. You want these lifelong customers and you want to get them when they're young and they're impressionable. So thank goodness our schools are very, very good about setting up barriers to protect young people from too many of those influences. But it does make it hard for organizations like mine who really want to get high schoolers while they're in school, because where they're at. They're gathered in groups and say, hey, during your summer break, why don't you come learn a skill? In this case, entrepreneurship or business management. So I think that's going to continue. It certainly was in 2019. I think it'll continue into the future. I think everyone always assumes that getting the money is the hard part. But like I just said, this is businesses teaching young people about the one thing they love and do day in and day out. And that's, be passionate about the company they run and teaching those business principles. So, getting the money is easy. My board would probably cringe if they heard me say that. Getting the money is certainly a doable thing. Getting the volunteers, also doable. Getting the students is the toughest. And so, if I had a takeaway, going into new communities, Kotzebue was a new one for us in 2019. I've never gone to Naknek for a camp. That's going to be a new one for 2020. Figuring out each of those is a new puzzle to solve. Like, how do you involve the local business community? How do you get those, business owners and operators mentoring students if they've never done it before. That's always a new puzzle to solve. And, as we do, we're adding 2 new communities next year. We've only ever added 1 new one in a given year before. So
And those two,
That-
Naknek and what?
we're going to Barrow.
Okay,
So,
cool.
Yeah. So figuring that out, I think maybe the most meaningful thing from 2019. And I don't know if I have it figured out, but I certainly learned a lot of lessons on how to incorporate new people into the program quickly.
Yeah, well, Alaska is complicated. It's a state that should have 3 time zones. I think it has 2. And it has a variety of cultures, especially as you get off the road system, that are unique unto themselves. So it's the Thanksgiving season.
Yeah.
I'm taking you off-roading here. What are you thankful for?
For me, the answer to that's pretty easy. It's always family. I'm more of a people person than a place person. And, I like my tribe. So that's the thing I'm most thankful for. Susanna's in a great place. She's super, super excited about her new opportunity. So she gets to be more sports specific in, all aspects of her day to day. Kids are doing great. My parents they still live out in the valley in Palmer, so I get to see them a lot. So those are the things I'm most thankful for. And I'm content. That's enough.
I'm similarly lucky. I'm a very lucky guy who has a good family, who has a good home, has a good job.
Yeah, I feel really lucky to have grown up the way I grew up. I learned the value of work and, self-worth, I think, mostly through that at a young age, and it stuck. And I don't know, I don't know what the ingredients are, but for me, they've mixed into the recipe is one of a lot of contentment. So, you asked when we started about who that person was in my 50s and 60s and 70s, and it doesn't look a lot different from now. Like, yeah, I could stand to, get a little more rest in the evenings.
Yeah.
Eat a few more salads.
What's your nightly sleep? How many hours do you get a night?
We're not talking about that
All
on
right.
the podcast.
Okay.
Just say I get a lot done and not a lot of rest.
Yeah. Hey, for the record, I mean, I was probably going to save it for the intro. I'll say it here. You're the singularly most talented person I know.
I don't know about that.
I do. I mean, I do have a joke, whereas what's Andy up to? I think he's whittling wood right now. Right. But if you're not whittling wood, you're like being an author, you're playing music. I'm still kind of bummed that you won't pull out the guitar for this sesh. You're painting.
2 guitars in the room. I'm not a guitarist.
Will you share your art page?
Yeah, AndyRogers.com.
Okay.
Just my name.com.
Yeah. So you're an amazing artist, like singularly the most talented person I've ever met. Easy. So 2 final questions, then we'll call it.
Okay.
You've seen this story, this kind of, you work in the entrepreneurial capacity building space. Ooh, fancy words.
I didn't know it was called that.
Yeah,
but okay.
Yeah, fancy words.
Entrepreneurial capacity
and you've
building space.
Seen that, like you kind of were early into it in 2009, 2010 with Alaska Business Week.
Really? I feel like we were late.
Well, who was doing it before then?
I don't know if anyone was doing it, but it felt like somebody should be, right? So I don't know if I particularly was late, but I guess as people who owned businesses, those are some of my peer groups. This is the group that came together to do this. People who owned and operated businesses. Felt like nobody was doing this, and somebody should have been.
Yeah, well, I think so. So the challenge there can be that business people need to do the thing, and the thing is, right?
Run profitably, right?
Right. Build your business.
Build your business, run profitably to keep everybody employed.
Yeah. And especially when you're on the early to mid part of that curve, it's hard to carve out the time. And especially the brain space, one of the currencies we didn't talk about, it's either described as bandwidth or energy. I mean, that's that's a currency that I find just in decline. and I have an abundance of energy, but it's interesting to watch that particular currency go down at a certain stage in life.
What I've seen though, from the professional people that have given their time to teach, I think they end up overall increasing their bandwidth. It's very rejuvenating and kind of exciting. There's all these adages like you don't really know something until you've tried to teach it, and I think a lot of those are, in some ways very true. But what I've seen is if you take the time if you spend the bandwidth, right, to teach other people the things that you're passionate about, or even the things that you're currently just figuring out, right? I think it overall increases your capacity to do more of that, to do more of the thing that your day job. I've had more mentors tell me that I think I learned more than the kids this week. It's almost like it almost falls on deaf ears now because everybody says it, and I think because it's always true, right? So if bandwidth is your limitation, I think the kind of thing that I do all the time now is maybe something to seriously consider. Bandwidth is an option. This may be doing that kind of thing, teaching, encouraging others, mentoring might be a way to overall stretch your bandwidth.
Okay.
Anyway, but I totally sidelined you.
No. I like sidelines.
Okay.
I live for them. Let's have you make an ask to the community. So what do you need from Anchorage and Alaska? I should say Alaska. Yeah. I'm overly Anchorage focused. What do you need from Alaska? What do you need from our community to make Alaska Business Week more successful?
So I take the all Alaska thing really seriously, right? And logistically, it comes at a cost because it can be hard to accommodate, students from all communities. But that's what I want as students. So when I was growing up, I think we were, in some ways, I was a little lucky. People I grew up with were a little bit lucky in that if there was a small business or the family had a side hustle or something, we got to see a little bit of how the sausage was made, right? But so much of even the students I get these days, even if they grow up in a family that has a home run business or the family owned business, so much is hidden inside computers now. You never see like a ledger sheet or let alone like a checkbook or anything like that. So even the students that have that benefit are how the business runs, like how the math of it works, is hidden from them. And so I think all students, whether they're exposed to business ownership, whether they're exposed to entrepreneurship, whether they're exposed to like accounting principles, they can benefit from some kind of economic education. Alaska is one of the very few states that doesn't have an economics requirement in K through 12 curriculum. We're one of a somewhat sadly larger number of states that doesn't have a personal finance portion of their curriculum. And I think both of those are incredibly valuable life skills that maybe we're doing a disservice by not doing a better job teaching those. So the ask I have for any community, business community, individual Alaskan communities, is find some way to teach business finance, personal finance, more broad economics, if that's the only thing that you can tackle. Teach that to your young people. And if you don't have a way to do it, send them to me and I'll do it.
Right on. And people can reach you at
alaskabusinessweek.com.
And Andy at alaskabusinessweek.com.
The website's alaskabusinessweek.com, but just about Andy info, all those things will find me.
All right. So final question, and I don't know how you're going to answer this.
Yeah.
What cheesy music does Andy Rogers listen to?
I don't know about cheesy music.
Yeah,
I got that.
Come on.
So somebody asked me.
People are bailing on this question.
No, I'm going to answer it. It's just interesting because I got this question earlier. You're not the first person to ask me that.
Well, that disappoints me in every way. Can I have one thing? Your
Night Ranger.
little night. There we go. We'll leave it at Night Ranger. Thanks a lot, Andy. Appreciate it, man.
Appreciate it, Joe.
Good job,
Thanks for
buddy.
the opportunity.
See ya.